The good news is we're here together. That's the good news. We're here together. We're going to learn a little. I don't want to say anything about the text yet because we're not all here. I'm just stalling another minute. But suffice it to say, I have a doozy for you today.
Oh, good.
I have a wonderful text for us, which is so layered and full that it might take us more than one session. Okay, well, I'm going to start talking slowly. It's good to be with you. I'm Rabbi David. As I look around, I think I know everyone. And wherever you're tuning in from, I'm glad that you're here. And I hope that you're doing well. And I hope that you're taking good care of yourself. We've now had a couple of Talmud sessions, and slowly, we're coming to understand what the Talmud is and how it works. This massive anthology of Jewish ideas and stories, this multi-generational collection that we've sort of learned about on multiple levels, sort of what it is at its surface. And I'll just do a super quick review here. On the surface, the Talmud is Mishnah plus Gemara. These two works, which bear very few similarities. The Mishnah, as we've talked about, is a very straightforward sort of Hebrew guidebook created by Yehuda Hanasi for a post-temple Jewish community. And that consists of sort of 6 volumes, organized by category. And then we have the Gemara, which is everything that the Mishnah is not. The Gemara is long and rambling. It goes from Hebrew to Aramaic and back again. It consists of multiple contributors, and sometimes stays on topic, sometimes doesn't. And most pages of the Talmud will include a Mishnah followed by its sort of accompanying Gemara. That's really what the Talmud is at its core. 63 volumes. In Hebrew, we call a volume a masechet. Another word you could use is a tractate. Tractate of Talmud, 63 tractates, organized by topic, and really covering every imaginable topic of life, not just quote unquote Jewish life, every aspect of how to live your life. The Talmud consists of 2,711 pages and somewhere around 1.5 million words. So that's Talmud 101. We've talked a little bit about the assumptions that the Talmud makes. The Talmud assumes that Judaism should be accessible and relatable. The Talmud assumes that minority opinions should be accounted for and included and lifted up. The Talmud assumes that disagreement is okay. The Talmud assumes that it's going to be read not just by sort of high-end scholars, but by Jews of all types. These are some of the assumptions that we sort of covered. Is this ringing a bell? Am I talking to a wall, or you're with me? You're with me. Okay. Okay. Anything else that I'm sort of leaving out, or that you would have me touch on as we sort of think about sort of big picture Talmud 101? Does anything there seem unclear, or you could use another little mini explanation? Carol, I see your hand, Carol.
Mishnah. So you're saying all these topics. So who decided? I mean, Judah Hanasi decided that there were things in the Torah that needed clarification, or
yeah, so good.
Just go over generally, like
I'll speak to that.
Topics that they talk about, or Thank
you. So so good. The tractates of the Talmud are rooted in these 6 volumes that Yehuda Hanasi created And you're right that Yehuda Hanassi sort of goes through the Torah and determines what could use some more attention and clarification. So let me do a show and tell very quickly. Don't run away. And so this is a quote unquote, you call these 6 volumes orders, a Seder, right? So there's 6 books that make up the Mishnah. This is what one book looks like. What book did I pick up? Zeraim. What's a zera? It's a seed. And this is all about planting and crops and growing and within this volume is all sorts of stuff sort of on that topic. And by the way, as we're doing show and tell, I still have this card that I keep from the people who gave me this Mishnah, Lisa's parents, when I was ordained. And so that's what a Mishnah looks like. Look, it looks like a novel. It looks like, oh, I can read this. This is manageable. This isn't overwhelming or intimidating. Then you get to a volume of Talmud, which totally looks different than that. This is like a massive phone book. Remember phone books? And you open it up and there's just a lot of language. Let me show you a traditional version. Stay there. Right, so the version I showed you first, this is sort of a very accessible Hebrew English edition. Koren, that's the name of the edition. But a more traditional version would look like this. The text in the middle is Mishnah and Gemara. The text around that is commentary. Closest to the binding is Rashi. Rashi is always closest to the binding because that's considered a place of honor. You're closest to the heart of the book. Does that help you a little, Carol? A little?
I mean, I can't imagine that you listened for 7 years or whatever, or participated in discussions on seeds and like kashrut, every detail. And whatever else, they go into such detail that you found that interesting.
Well, I didn't always find it interesting, to be honest. No, when you study Talmud daily, or even not so daily, inevitably, you will muddle through many, 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 many pages that are just not relevant to life today, at least on the surface. Consider the tractate that I'm working on now, and that, that Daf Yomi has us in now. Tractate Nazir, which is an entire tractate about this concept of the Nazirite, which gets a little bit of explanation in the book of Numbers, the portion of Naso. We're told that if we want to position ourselves closer to God, there's some things we can do, that we don't cut our hair, that we don't drink any wine, and that we have no contact with the dead. We don't go in cemeteries. And that the Torah outlines this is an option available to you. And that whole explanation lasts maybe a paragraph in the Torah. So the rabbis are going to have 10,000 questions about, whoa. Who's eligible to be a Nazirite? What happens if you slip up and you break your vow? What happens if you have no choice but to go in a cemetery? Hence this whole entire volume about how do you do this? And not to give it all away, but the rabbis will eventually say, look, this is all dangerous and we think no one should do it. They'll actually go as far as to say to be a Nazirite is a sin because they feel that it'll take us to a place of zealotry and fundamentalism and it'll divide the community. And they were right. And there are modern day Nazirites that are doing exactly that, even if they don't call themselves Nazirites. Anyway, I get into this in my EKI, which you'll read next week. So anyway, is this all helpful? Okay. Do you want to look at today's text? Yes, that's what we're here for. That was all the appetizer. Now it's time for the meal. So, I'm bringing to you a text from a tractate called Ta'anit, which I'm not sure we looked at yet. And I don't think we've been in this tractate yet. Ta'anit means fasts, a fast day. And in the time of the Talmud, there were many fast days on the calendar, some of which we're aware of now, like Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av. There's a fast day before Purim. But there are also a lot of other fast days that the rabbis observed in times of crisis, in times of fear, in times of drought. They would institute communal fast days as a form of sort of excessive or ardent prayer, as a way of sort of conveying a desire to God. So this whole tractate deals with fast days, and that's what I'm going to take us into now. And you're going to find that our text deals with someone who you might have heard of. And if you haven't heard of him, you'll hear of him now. And he's a wonderful character from the Talmud. Unclear if he ever actually lived, but he's a wonderful character from the Talmud. Let me share my screen and get us to it already. Let's see. Okay. Are you here?
Yep.
Okay. So we're in Tractate Ta'anit, and we're going to learn about a time of drought. And the people are quite concerned. We need rain. We depend on rain. We're an agrarian society. We need rain for our food, for our livelihood. And so remember, the lighter text is our modern day editor giving us a hand. And the darker text is the quote unquote original. So first, and we're in the Gemara now. All right, if I'm going too fast or saying anything that doesn't make sense, just stop me, or you can put anything in the chat. I want to make sure we all feel good. So the Mishnah taught an incident occurred in which the people sent a message to Honi HaMa'agel, which means Honi, the circle maker. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Yeah, maybe. Yes. Good. Sort of this kind of mythic, famous character. And this event is related in greater detail in the following Breita. So it's them saying, look, there's a story that we're about to tell. And the sages taught once, most of the month of Adar had passed, but rain had still not fallen. Adar is a springtime month. That's when we celebrate Purim, right? So if there's no rain in Israel in that time of year, that's concerning, because there should be. So they sent this message to Honi, the circle maker. And they said to him, pray and rain will fall. Right? So they're ascribing to him certain superpowers. They're saying, look, you, Honi, maybe if you pray, the rain will fall. All right? He prayed, but no rain fell. Okay. So what does he do now? He drew a circle in the dust, and he stood inside it in the manner that the prophet Habakkuk did, which is what happened in Habakkuk. And here we're going to show the reference as it's stated, and I will stand upon my watch and set myself upon the tower, and I will look out to see what he will say to me, what I shall answer when I am reproved, right? So here's an incident from the book of prophets where another Jewish figure said, I'm going to stay put, almost challenging God. I'm not moving until there's a development. So Honi is sort of positioning himself in a similar way. Let's see what happens. He draws the circle. Honi draws the circle. And Honi said before God, he's now inside of his circle that he's drawn in the dust, right? You can picture it. He's standing in his circle. And he says, Master of the universe, your children have turned their faces towards me, as I am like a member of your household, right? That this community has decreed that I am akin to you, O God. Therefore, I take an oath by your great name that I will not move from here until you have mercy upon your children and answer their prayers for rain. Honi's saying, I am not leaving this place until you make it rain, oh God. Well, wouldn't you know it? Rain began to trickle down, but only in small droplets, right? So we could pause here and just sort of assess what we've seen so far, right? The people ascribing power to Honi. Honi not resisting that, is saying, whoa, 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 we're all people here. All prayers are equal. Who am I that I should be your ambassador? We all have access to God. No, he doesn't do any of that. He says, okay, I'm going to do that. First, I'm going to try to pray as you pray in sort of a normal, typical Judaic way. That doesn't work. Now I'm going to take on a fairly unconventional method. I'm going to make this circle. I'm going to stand in this circle and I'm going to have a chat with God in what appears to be first a sort of very deferential way. Remember, he says, master of the universe. Look, I'm not God. You're in charge. Your children have turned their faces to me. They're not turning to you, they're turning to me, as if I'm part of your household. And he says, I'm not going to move here until you have mercy on your children. And the rain trickles. So what do we do with all this? We have Honi and we have a tiny bit of rain. Any thoughts so far? Is God listening and responding to Honi and this approach, or no?
It would appear that he is responding.
Yes.
He's responding a little bit.
A little bit within that circle is where the rain is coming down, but just within that circle.
Well, does it say that?
No.
No. it
I
doesn't.
think that the trickling is the key here. That, okay, well, rain does fall, but
not
seemingly not enough rain to really make a difference. So
Maybe-
it's as if Honi has been heard, but something's still amiss. Something's still not right. God hasn't responded outright.
Maybe
God has given a little nod. Charlotte.
maybe it takes more than one person.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
here we could begin.
maybe Honi himself is not enough. Maybe it takes the community to make it happen.
Think about what we know about prayer and about learning, right? We are all about community. Everything we do is in community. We study in community, we learn in community, we pray in community, we grieve, we celebrate. And here we have the antithesis of all that. We have someone who has literally created a boundary around himself and also created a boundary against Jewish normative practices. And yet God seems to be listening. So this is maybe a problem for us. Let's see where it goes, okay? I know you've all read ahead. I know how this works, but let's see where it goes. His students said to him, so the students say to Honi, who is a teacher, we see here, right? He is a teacher. Rabbi, we have seen that you can perform great wonders, but this quantity of rain is not enough to ensure that we will not die, right? This rain is not particularly helpful. It appears to us that a small amount of rain is falling only to enable you to dissolve your oath. I like the word dissolve in juxtaposition with the rain, but it's not nearly enough to save us. So, it's as if, to come back to Marlene's comment, maybe the rain's not falling only in the circle, but it is seemingly falling only for the sake of Honi and his sort of outlandish challenge / promise. So, okay, maybe that's the case. Maybe the students have a point, right? Once again, as we've seen so many times, the students have greater wisdom than the teacher. Maybe. Okay, so Honi says, let me go back to God. So Honi said to God, I did not ask for this. Right now we get just a little bit of chutzpah, but for rain to fall, rain to fill the cisterns, the ditches, and the caves, right? Honi says, I wanted a true rain, a rain that will save us, that will save our society, that will enable our way of life here. So rain began to fall furiously. This is, we be careful what you wish for, until each and every drop was as big as the mouth of a barrel. And the sages estimated that no drop was less than a log in size. That's a sort of Aramaic measurement. And his students said to him, Rabbi, we've seen that you can call on God to perform miracles and we will not die. But now it appears to us that the rain is falling only to destroy our world. Right? So in the beginning,
Never satisfied.
we didn't have enough rain. And now we have far too much rain. Right? So we're picking up on a little bit of a pattern here where maybe God is showing God's sort of might and or unhappiness toward Honi, right? And sort of teaching Honi a little bit that his chutzpah will not be rewarded. And yet, we can't help but notice Honi asked for rain and it rained. What do we do here? We, by the way, are going to we have the same problem that the rabbis have. What do we do with a Honi? Right? What do we do with someone who is outside of quote unquote typical Jewish practice?
So does this have to do with how Honi is asking God, what Honi is saying to God? That God is not happy with how
I think, Janice, I think that's part of it, right? How do we usually pray? We pray maybe with a book in the synagogue. We pray with a minyan, right? We pray the service in a very particular order generally. You know, this prayer feels sort of loaded with chutzpah, right? Our prayers are couched in a place of respect. When we do the Amidah, you know, traditionally those 18 prayers, we begin by honoring God and thanking God and blessing God. And only eventually do we get to, please heal me, please help my family, right? So it could be the approach itself. It could be the language itself, where Honi is essentially challenging God. That could be the problem. Any other theories? You want to see where it goes?
Yes.
Let's see where it goes. Honi, so now we have too much rain. Honi again said before God, I did not ask for this harmful rain either, but for rain of benevolence, blessing, generosity. And subsequently, the rains fell in their standard manner until all the people sought higher ground and ascended to the Temple Mount due to the rain. So now the rain is falling in a quote unquote normal way. And incidentally, it's brought all of the people, where have the people gone?
The synagogue.
Yeah,
The temple in Jerusalem.
the Temple Mount. Right? So somehow Honi has brought the people, Honi, who is this sort of outlier with these sort of outlandish practices, he has found a way to bring people to sort of the heart of Judaism. Right? The center of Jewish life. He's brought them together. This is curious. I'm making you think today, right? We had some of the like introductory stories. Now we're getting into it a little bit. I'm challenging you a little. They said to him, Rabbi, just as you prayed that the rain should fall, so too, can you please now pray that they should stop? And he said to them, now he's teaching them, this is the tradition I received, that one does not pray over an excess of good, right? It's not the Jewish way to say, stop bestowing such good on me. That's not a prayer that we utter. We thank God for the good. We relish the good, but we never say, leave the good alone and leave me alone now. Right? So Honi here is calling on tradition. And he's teaching them, this is not what we do as Jews. We don't say prayers like that, right? So Honi is a contradiction. That's what he is. He's a contradiction. He's complicated. He's wise when it comes to tradition, when it comes to Torah. And yet, he's a bit of a rebel, right? He's pushing the boundaries, literally. He's creating new boundaries. And he's taking on sort of rebellious practices. So I just want us to pause for a second and sort of assess Honi. If there were a Honi in our midst today, what would we say to that Honi? What would we do? Or taking it even out of Judaism. How do we feel about rebellious activity? Or, maybe we could soften it and say, and here it's going to feel much different all of a sudden, creative prayer, right? A prayer that comes from a place of our own personhood, our own self, that's not in a book. We like that, right? We celebrate that. We want people to have their own self, their own personality, their own story, right? We talked about the need for keva and kavanah, right? Keva is the fixed prayer, the traditions we inherit, the teachings we inherit. Keva, that which is fixed. And then we talk about kavanah, which is our own personality, our own style, our own creativity. So Jewish life has to consist of both. If it's all keva, it's very rote and rigid. If it's all kavanah, it's all loosey-goosey, no rules, no nothing. Honi seems to have both. What do you think? Do we like him so far, or we're sort of not sure? Does God like him?
Seems to.
Seems to, yeah. God seems to, because he makes it rain.
Mm-hmm.
But why is the community relying on Honi? And wasn't
All
he
good
supposed to be in a
questions.
circle? Wasn't he supposed to be in a circle? He's now left the circle and gone up to the mountain.
Right. So on the one hand, we could say God seems to be listening to Honi. And is God listening to Honi because he's Honi, or is it possible that God's listening to Honi because Honi's prayer is heartfelt and earnest? It's not about the circle. It's not about any of that. It's that Honi carries expectations, and Honi carries a sense of the dire in his prayer, right? His prayer is coming from a place that's profound. He's praying not only for himself, but the whole community here. They've all come to him. I'm just going to mute whoever's.
It looks like it's Jonathan and Linda.
Tomorrow,
They're
okay.
lighting up.
Okay, well.
Let me see. Where is that? I'm doing 5 things at once. Oh, I see. Okay. So I lost what I was thinking. So maybe God's listening to Honi because his prayer is heartfelt. We don't know why God's listening, but if God is listening, then why did the rains fall in the wrong way? Right? Part of the story is to remind us that we can't control God and that we can't control everything. And that as much as we can ascribe superpowers to people and look up to people, at the end of the day, God rules. And I think God here is teaching the lesson. I mean, it's also a story about teachers and students.
Mhm.
The ultimate teacher in this story is God. God is saying, look, you can look up to this Honi all you want, but when all is said and done, I'm in charge. And I'll decide when it rains and how much. I think there's a bit of that going on too. That's very humbling. And we've all felt that, we've all been humbled by a lack of control. We've all felt that, right? We've all felt that in our own way. So there's a bit of that. As there's a bit of sort of celebrating a kind of prayer that is not rote and rigid and predictable. So let's see where we go. Okay. And then I'm going to fast forward us a little bit. So Honi continued, now we're at the Temple Mount. So he says, okay, well, bring me a bull and I'm going to sacrifice it as a thanks offering, right? This is how I'm going to say thank you to God.
God doesn't.
Again, this is Honi understanding tradition and being versed in tradition, that this is how it works, right? It's not that he's all rogue. It's that he knows when to go rogue. So they brought him a bull for a thanks offering, and he placed his two hands on it, and he said before God, Master of the universe, your nation Israel, whom you brought out of Egypt, cannot bear either an excess of good or an excess of punishment. Right now it's a commentary on Israel, on the Jews. You grew angry with them and withheld rain. They're unable to bear it, right? You bestowed upon them too much good. They're unable to bear it. May it be your will that the rain stop and that there be relief for the world. Okay, so Honi now is trying to lecture God and saying these Jews, they're never satisfied. They have trouble when there's too much. They have trouble when there's too little. Nothing's ever right, it would appear. May it be your will that the rain stop and that there be relief for the world. Immediately the wind blew, the clouds dispersed, the sun shone, and everyone went out to the fields and gathered for themselves truffles and mushrooms that had sprouted in the rain. Right, so now Honi's gone to a traditional place. He sacrificed the bull at the altar. This is, by the way, how we know this story is a little mythic, because as it's being written, there is no temple, right? This is written hundreds of years post-temple. So it's all fiction, which is fine. But when Honi goes to this place of tradition, God listens. As if to say, and here's the rabbis chiming in, please try to play by the Jewish rules. They exist for a reason. We inherited them. And as much as we appreciate creativity and personality, if we all abide by the same basic rules, we're going to literally survive. I think there's a bit of that here in the end. Am I the only one that sees that? What do you think? Why are we so quiet, my friends? Marlene.
I think that because the community assembled,
Yeah,
and yes, Honi was saying the prayer, but he was saying it not just for himself standing in the middle of a circle, but for the community, in community, that had an effect, let me say. I don't know that that was all of it, but certainly it had an effect. It had the effect of God paying attention and, and listening. He heard what he had to say.
God seems to be responding significantly when Honi's prayers are communal in nature, right? When he's invoking the Israelites. There seems to be a little message there about what it means to pray for others, what it means to pray for our community, that as much as we're inclined to make it about ourselves, and how could we not issue prayers for our own self, our own well-being, that we should bear in mind our community. And of course, the irony here is that Honi has set himself apart from the community, literally, and that he needs to be reminded too. When we stick together as a community, when we look out for each other, when we pray for each other, good will come. The sun will shine. The mushrooms will grow. Right? There's a bit of that lesson here too. It's a really beautiful story, and it's a slippery story. No pun intended. It's a slippery story because there's a lot of little layers here, and it's not so black and white. It's really not. We're running out of time, which tends to happen. So I want to make sure we touch on the next part of the story. So along comes another sort of respected member of the sages. Shimon ben Shetach relays to Honi the circle maker. He says, if you were not Honi, I would have decreed ostracism upon you. He's saying, look, if you weren't this famous guy, we would have kicked you out of here. For were these years like the years of Elijah, when the keys of rain were entrusted to Elijah's hands, and he swore it would not rain, wouldn't the name of heaven have been desecrated by your oath to leave the circle until it rains? Saying this whole process, this whole sort of approach that you're taking, it's blasphemous. This is not what we do as Jews. Once you pronounce this oath, either yours or Elijah's must be falsified, right? Elijah once did that. The prophet Elijah once did that. And now you're trying to sort of override him, he's saying. However, what can I do to you? As you nag God and he does your bidding, right? I want to ostracize you, but I can't because it would appear that God's listening to you. So what, like a son who nags his father and his father does his bidding. That's a great line, right? He's saying to Honi, look, you're like this spoiled kid. And worse than that, a spoiled kid whose parents appease him and spoil him. And the son says to his father, Father, take me to be bathed in hot water, wash me with cold waters, give me nuts, give me almonds, peaches, and pomegranates. And his father gives it to him. Right? Like you have your parent wrapped around your finger, and still the parent obliges every time. And about you, the verse states, your father and mother will be glad, and she who bore you will rejoice. Like you're this privileged kid. You're this entitled, spoiled kid. I don't know what to do with you, Honi. As far as the Talmud goes, that's pretty strong language, right? To say you get everything that you want, I don't understand it. The rest of us are here playing by the rules. And it speaks to a lack of fairness. There's a mystery here. And it also points to, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so by all means interrupt me. Even if there's someone whose approach we don't agree with, or who we don't fully understand, it doesn't mean we should kick them out of the community, right? It means maybe we should draw them close and say, look, you're part of this people too, even though I don't get it, and my ways are different than your ways, we're both part of this people. I'm just going to keep going. The sages taught, what message did the members of the chamber of the hewn stone, the court, send to Honi? All right, so what does the court have to say about all this? And they said, about you, the verse states, you shall also decree a matter, and it shall be established for you, and the light shall shine upon your way, saying, this guy, actually, we should celebrate him, because no matter what he says seems to come to be. And we should hold him close. They interpreted, you shall decree a matter, you, Honi, decree from below, and the Holy One, blessed be he, fulfills from above. That whatever you ask for comes to be, and the light shall shine upon your ways. Generation that was in darkness, you have illuminated it with your prayer. Right? They are celebrating him. They are honoring him. Right? So the rabbis are showing us they like Honi. They like him a lot. They want to be like him. And, the message for us, therefore, is maybe we should go to a place of chutzpah every now and again. Maybe we shouldn't be so stoic and parv, neutral. Choni, this stuff matters to Choni. He's willing to take chances. He's willing to place himself in a minority. He's willing to express emotion to God. He's willing to put it all on the line because this stuff matters to him. It matters to him that his community receives the rain that they need to live. It's not just an exercise. The rabbis like that. How could you not, right? I mean, sure, he's a little kooky, puts himself in a circle. He stands outside waving his fist at God. But he's not coming from a place of, I don't know, what's the word? He's not coming from a place of
Arrogance.
Yeah, arrogance, but also, it's not all sort of just an academic exercise for him. Carol, I see your hand.
You have to unmute, Carol.
What was in the Torah that made Judah Hanesi think it needed clarification of this type? So that's one question. And the other one is, I'm always skeptical of the answering of some prayers and not other prayers. What was it about him that his prayer, it makes somebody who prays and his prayer isn't answered feel bad?
Yeah, great point. So first of all, Yehuda Hanas, none of this is in the Mishnah. None of this is in Yehuda Hanasi's work. Yehuda Hanasi has a whole section on fast days. And when the Gemara starts to wrestle with Yehuda Hanasi's teaching about fasts, as often happens, there's tangent, and this becomes a tangent. And Carol, I agree with you. I think it's problematic to sort of lift up a theology in which some prayers are answered and some are not, as if God is above sort of taking score. I don't think that's the way prayer works. And I struggle with that. I wrestle with that, the way in which personal prayer works. However, I believe in prayer, and the rabbis believe in prayer. And remember, the very notion of Jews praying as we understand prayer is pretty new in the time of the Talmud, right? The way that you used to connect with God is through the sacrifices, through the offerings at the temple. So they are before our very eyes trying to figure out prayer. What prayers does God listen to? How do you pray? What is the balance between personal prayer and communal prayer? What is the balance between prayer of the heart and prayer of the prayer book? They're figuring all of that out before our very eyes here. And we're still working to figure that out. So I'm going to keep going because there's like a punchline at the end of all of this. If we can just get there, let's see. We're very close. Okay, we're very close, guys. So this whole paragraph after is praising Honi, that you saved this generation through your prayer, you delivered this generation through your prayer, the work of your hands has saved us, right? So like we said, the rabbis on the one hand are nervous about Honi and the fact that he seems to be an outlier, but on the other hand, they realize his prayers are being being answered, and therefore maybe we should all be, again, a little less stoic, a little less rigid, a little less formulaic. and like Honi, a little more passionate and emotional. That we need both, ultimately. We need both. And Honi embodies both. Okay, it's time for the punchline. It's 11:45. I'm very proud of us. I had visions of us getting to this point at like 11:59, and I'd have to leave you hanging. This is how you know Honi, by the way, in what we're about to see. The Gemara relates another story about Honi. Right now that we're talking about Honi, the editors say, oh, wait, we have another story of Honi. Let's squeeze it in right here, even though it doesn't relate to fasts or anything like that. Rabbi Yochanan said all the days of the life of Honi, that righteous man, he was distressed over the meaning of the verse. A song of ascents, when the Lord brought back those who returned to Zion, we were like those who dream, which is from Psalm 126, and a psalm we sing traditionally on Friday nights before Birkat Hamazon. You might know the tune. Shir Hamalo Peshuv Adonai et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kecholmim. Anyone ringing a bell?
Yeah.
Maybe a little. So that psalm begins with this premise of when God finally brought us back to the land of Israel after the end of the exile, it was like we were dreaming, right? Which is a turn of phrase. But of course, for the rabbis, everything has to be wrestled with, challenged. And so the rabbis will say, he said to himself, is there really a person who can sleep and dream for 70 years? The length of the exile, this particular exile, right? So could it be that someone was like sleeping and dreaming the length of that exile?
Rip Van Winkle story.
Right. So one day he was walking along the road when he saw a certain man planting a carob tree. This is Rabbi Yochanan.
Yeah. Yes.
And Honi said to him, this tree, after how many years will it bear fruit? Why are you planting a carob tree? And the man said to him, it will not produce fruit until 70 years have passed. And Honi said to him, is it obvious to you that you're going to live 70 years, that you expect to benefit from this tree? Good questions, right? Honi is wise.
The man
He
is
said to
wise.
him, that man found a world full of carob trees, just as my ancestors planted for me,
So shall I plant for.
so too shall I plant for my descendants. Classic, classic, classic moment in the Talmud. Honi sat and he ate some bread and sleep overcame him and he slept. A cliff formed over him. He disappeared from sight. And wouldn't you know it, Honi, mythic superpower Honi, slept for 70 years. Sometimes I'm that tired too. I feel like I could. And when he awoke, he saw a certain man gathering carobs from that very tree. And Honi said to him, are you the one who planted this tree 70 years ago? And the man said to him, I am his son's son. I am his grandson. And Honi said to him, I can learn from this that I have slept 70 years, right? Because he knows the carob tree takes 70 years. And indeed, he saw his donkey had sired several herds during those many years. And Honi went home. And this is all the part of the story that never gets told on Tu B'Shvat or what have you. But we have a minute still, yeah. Honi went home. 70 years have passed. He's learned the lesson that as we plant, we're planting not merely for ourselves, but for our children and their children, literally and metaphorically. We're planting the seeds that they'll benefit from generations from now. And we should be careful about the seeds that we are planting. So he goes home and he says to the members of the household, is the son of Honi the circle maker still alive? his own son. And they said to him, his son is no longer with us, but his son's son is alive. Honi's grandson is alive. And he said to him, I am Honi, the circle maker. They did not believe him. He went to the study hall where he heard the sages say about one scholar, his halachot, his teachings are as enlightening and as clear as in the years of Honi the circle maker. For when Honi would enter the study hall, he would resolve for the sages any difficulty they ever had. Honi says to them, I am he. That's me you're talking about. But they did not believe him and did not pay him proper respect. Honi became upset, prayed for mercy, and died. And Radha said, this explains the folks saying that people say either friendship or death, as one who has no friends is better off dead. Oh boy, this is the ending of the story. Okay, let's take a minute. So first, the piece about the planting. Right, incidentally, we began with a story about rain, and rain needed to grow our crops. And now we're still dealing with crops, nature, trees, carob tree. And of course, anytime we see tree, a little light should go off. Tree often is a stand-in for Torah. Eitz Chaim Hi, it is a tree of life, right? So we could replace tree every time it appears in the story with Torah, right? We're creating Torah for the next generation and the next generation. We're passing down Torah. Our actions around Torah now will have consequences and ramifications a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations from now. And that as we find a world full of carob trees, so may we create a world of carob trees for those to come. Which is a beautiful teaching, of course. Honi goes to sleep for 70 long years. And he awakes and he goes home. I always thought in that moment he should have a carob. You would be hungry after 70 years, and you're under the tree. But I'll put that in my edition of the Talmud. So what do we do with the fact that nobody recognizes him 70 years later? They don't recognize him. They recognize his teachings, but they don't recognize him. It feels tragic. What do you do with that? Do you want me to help you?
Yes.
Are you stumped?
Yeah.
I think it's about legacy, right? It's not so much about ourself, our being, what we look like. I think what we're remembered by is what we instill in others, right? Which is why they quote him and they reference him in their teachings, and they're very, very much cognizant of all the Torah that he brought to them. And that's what matters. Not so much that he was tall or short or he had long hair or what have you. And I think that's sort of the part of the message now. And the irony is, how does he end his life? Alone. It's the fact that he's alone that is the end of him. And of course, at the start of the story, he purposely set himself alone by going into the circle. And he had to learn the importance of community. And now he sees it at the end of his life too. We need people, we need community. We can't do it alone. We can't always be rogue. All right, I'm gonna take a breath.
Wow.
A lot here, a lot. There's a lot here. We touched on some really sort of primary Jewish topics, I think, right? We talked about self versus community. We talked about keva and kavanah. We talked about prayer book versus the prayers of the heart. We talk about what lives on, what does it mean to leave a legacy? And we talked about all of that. You were good sports. Did you like these texts?
Yeah,
Yes.
Good texts, right?
Yeah.
Thought-provoking.
Very thought-provoking.
And it shows that Talmud is not always fairy tales. It's not always neatly packaged. You know, I think that's important to understand, that a lot of times the Talmud is just gonna
22.
put us in a place where we just have to wrestle and think and think and think. And the sort of ending message is not always so clean or clear. Right. And I hope as you think of the Honi stories, it's really an anthology of stories. You find something in there that speaks to you. Right. There's a lot that I sort of threw at you. And I hope you find something in there that really does speak to you. Is there a part of Honi that speaks to you?
Yeah,
Rabbi, I feel sad that at the end that he didn't realize what was happening, and he was chided for maybe being self-centered, and his parents gave him everything he wanted, and you said he put himself off in a circle by himself. So even after the 70 years, he came back. If the tree is Torah, then he should have been aware that the Torah lived for 7 years and that his legacy lived on. And, it's just
70.
sad that he died at that point in time, feeling that he wasn't a part of the community anymore.
It's a tough ending. And it's a little bit of a chastising of the community that, okay, it's one thing to remember the teachings, but we also need to remember the human being, right? It comes back a little bit to that sort of stoic versus emotional, right? The sort of rote versus the personal. There's a little bit of that there. Like, these students are very well versed. They're clearly very smart. They remember stuff that was taught 70 years ago, but they're not willing to make a human being feel good in their midst. How learned are they?
well, but
They're-
how did he present himself?
Yeah, he separated himself.
That's a question.
He had separated himself from the community, and
Mm-hmm.
now he's come back to the community. And what were his expectations?
You're right.
Ending, his expectations were seemingly to be exalted,
Right.
and that's not what this lesson is.
I think you're right.
That's
Maybe
not
there is
what
some of
this
that. He
lesson was.
expected to be exalted. That's a good way of putting it. And these students don't know him. They don't know him. He's not a familiar face to them. Carol, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that 2 generations came after him, so there would be nobody there who would recognize him as Honi.
Right. That we live
So
on.
that's like seeing, well, this brings you back to, I guess, reality, that they would need something that they could really recognize in a person.
Right. And it does, as I pointed out, it speaks to what does live on ultimately.
Right.
What does live on?
Your good deeds.
Your good deeds. Your good deeds, the life that you lived.
Rabbi, I have in my basement, I have a picture of my parents. It's like
Yeah.
a big blown up picture of my parents, and my grandson, who's now 28, went downstairs and he said to me, "Who are those people?"
Yeah.
And he is named for my mom. And I said, "Oh," I said, that's my mother and father, and that's who you're named for." And he said, "That's really cool." But
Yeah.
when you said be careful what seeds you plant, how you plant them. And for me, this is an illustration of what my parents did for me. How they raised me, how I raised my children, and how now my grandchildren are being raised. And for me, that's a very positive seed. He
Yeah.
didn't recognize their faces, but who they were is still part of who he is. And
That's well said.
For me, that's like the most powerful thing that I'm taking away from this today.
Yeah, I think Honi's legacy is a legacy for good. I mean, we remember him as a sage. We remember him as a scholar and as a leader. We remember him as someone who had courage. I think that's how we remember him. The fact that he wasn't recognized, I think is meant to draw attention to, well, what matters more is how you're remembered. Closing commentary, comment, question, issue. Good text, right? Good text. Fun, challenging. I'm starting to we're starting to warm up a little. I feel we're taking the training wheels off a little bit, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And I'm going to have us think and wrestle a little bit with some of these texts. That's the beauty of it. We're in it together, and let's just keep going. Okay, let's keep going.
Yes,
Friends, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Sending love. I
Shabbat
hope it's a
Shalom.
Shabbat of
Shabbat
peace, of joy. It's great being with you, always.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
And
Rabbi.
with you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great day today.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye.